I heard the baby before I saw him crying, raw, starving screams that made my breasts ache and soak my shirt. When I looked up from my economy seat, everyone in first class was turning away from the man holding him, faces drained with fear. I knew instantly he was dangerous. I went to him anyway. It was the worst mistake of my life. The alpha holding the infant looked like he wanted to murder someone, his tattooed neck flexing as he tried to soothe the baby. His expensive suit couldn't hide the violence in his posture, and every single person in that cabin was pretending he didn't exist, their fear so thick I could taste it. I'd been producing milk for 3 months since my son River was born. My body had given me this one gift after taking everything else. A deadbeat alpha who'd left the moment he saw the pregnancy test. A family who disowned me for getting pregnant outside of marriage. A job I'd lost because I couldn't afford childcare. But my body made milk, abundant and endless, and right now that screaming baby needed it more than my sleeping River back home with my elderly neighbor Mrs. Chun. The flight attendant walked past the alpha 3 times without making eye contact, her hands shaking as she pushed the drink cart. And I watched the alpha's jaw clench tighter each time, watched his son's face turn purple from crying, and I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my legs trembling as I walked toward first class, and the flight attendant grabbed my arm, her nails digging in hard enough to leave marks. "That's Adrian Cross. If you bother him, he'll have you killed," she whispered frantically. But I pulled free because that baby was suffering and I had what he needed. I should have listened to her. "Mr. Cross?" I said, my voice barely audible over the screaming, and his head snapped toward me, gray eyes cold as winter. And I saw his hand move toward his jacket, toward what I knew was a gun, and I forced myself to keep talking. "I'm lactating. I can feed your son. Please, he's starving." Time stopped. The entire plane held its breath, and Adrian's eyes dropped to my soaked shirt, then back to my face, and something dangerous flickered in his expression. Something that made my omega want to bare my throat in submission. "You want to put your mouth on my son?" he said slowly, each word sharp as a knife. And I realized how that sounded, how insane I must look, but I nodded anyway. "My breasts are full. My own baby is 3 months old. I'm clean. I'm healthy. Please, I can help," I begged, tears streaming down my face now because that infant's cries were physically painful to hear. And Adrien stared at me for 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. "If anything happens to him, I'll kill you slowly," Adrien said, standing up, towering over me at 6'4", and he placed his son in my arms, and the baby was so small, so perfect, and I sat down right there in the aisle, lifted my shirt without shame and let him latch. The relief was instant. The baby's cries cut off, replaced by hungry suckling, and my body flooded with oxytocin, with that primal satisfaction of feeding a child. And when I looked up, Adrien was staring at me like I'd performed a miracle, like I'd given him back something he thought he'd lost forever. "His name is Marcus," Adrien said quietly, sitting beside me in the aisle, blocking me from the other passengers, and his voice had lost that deadly edge. "His mother died giving birth to him 8 weeks ago, hemorrhaged out before they could save her. And he's been screaming every day since. Won't take formula. Won't take bottles. The doctors said he was failing to thrive, said I was going to lose him too." My heart cracked wide open at the devastation in his voice, at the way his hand shook when he reached out to touch Marcus's tiny fist. And I understood then why everyone was afraid of him. He was a man with nothing left to lose, and those were the most dangerous kind. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears falling onto Marcus's face, and Adrien's thumb came up to wipe them away. The gesture so gentle it made me sob harder. "Don't cry, you're saving his life right now, you're an angel," Adrien said, and his hand cupped my cheek, his scent washing over me, gunpowder and cedar and something wild that made my omega purr. And I knew I was in trouble, knew this alpha was dangerous in ways I couldn't even comprehend, but Marcus needed me, and I couldn't walk away from a baby who needed me. The plane landed and Adrien's men surrounded us immediately. For massive alphas in black suits who cleared a path through the airport like Moses parting the Red Sea. And Adrien kept his hand on my lower back, possessive and protective, and people scattered when they saw him coming. "Where do you live? I'm taking you home," Adrien said as we reached a black SUV that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 years, and I hesitated because my apartment was a nightmare. A 5th-floor walk-up in the Bronx with heat and rats in the walls, but Adrien's eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, Omega. I can smell your fear, and if your living situation is bad, I'm fixing it. 141st Street, the Bronx. I admitted, my voice small and Adrian's jaw ticked, but he nodded, helping me into the car, and Marcus was still nursing, still peaceful for the first time in his short life. The drive took 40 minutes, and Adrien made phone calls the entire time. His voice cold and commanding as he gave orders I didn't understand, and when we pulled up to my building, I watched his face go blank with rage. You live here with a 3-month-old baby, Adrien said, not a question, and I flinched at his tone. It's all I can afford. River's father left, my family won't help, and I lost my job at the diner because I couldn't afford a sitter. I explained, climbing out of the car, and Adrien followed me up 5 flights of stairs. Marcus asleep in his arms now, and when I unlocked my door, I wanted to die of shame. My apartment was 1 room, barely 300 square feet. River's crib took up half the space. My mattress on the floor took up the other half. There was no kitchen, just a hot plate, no bathroom, just a shared one in the hallway, and the windows were covered in plastic because they were broken, and Adrien stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Pack your things. Both of you are coming home with me, Adrien said, pulling out his phone, and I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. I'm not asking, Omega. I'm telling you, my son needs you, and I'm not letting you raise your child in this hellhole. You have 5 minutes to pack before my men come up and do it for you. Mrs. Chun appeared with River, my beautiful baby boy with his dark curls and chubby cheeks, and he was crying, and I took him from her, soothing him, and Adrien's eyes softened when he saw us together. You're a good mother? Adrien said, stepping closer, and his hand came up to stroke River's head, and River stopped crying, stared up at Adrien with wide eyes, and something passed between them, some silent alpha communication I didn't understand. I can't just move in with you. I don't even know you, I protested weakly, but Adrien's hand gripped my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. You know I can give you safety, security, a real home for your son, and you know Marcus needs you, needs your milk, needs your care, so stop fighting this, stop fighting me, and let me take care of you, Adrien said, his alpha voice bleeding through, commanding and irresistible, and my Omega rolled over, submitted, and I nodded. We moved that night. Adrien's men packed my few belongings in 10 minutes, and the penthouse was a palace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, marble floors, a nursery that looked like a dream, and a bedroom for me and River that had its own bathroom, a real kitchen, furniture that wasn't falling apart, and I cried when I saw it, overwhelmed by the generosity, by the sudden change in my circumstances. Tomorrow I'm taking you shopping, you need clothes, River needs clothes, and I'm setting up bank accounts for both of you, you'll have access to whatever you need, Adrien said, watching me feed both babies on the massive sectional couch, and I shook my head. That's too much. I can't accept that, I whispered, but Adrien knelt in front of me, his hands on my knees. You're feeding my son, keeping him alive, giving him what his own mother couldn't, and I'm an alpha who takes care of what's mine. And you're mine now, Kai, you and River both, so get used to it, Adrien said, and his hand slid up my thigh, possessive and warm, and I felt heat pool in my belly despite my exhaustion. The first week was heaven. Adrien was attentive and gentle. He held River while I showered. He brought me food while I fed Marcus. He asked about my life, my dreams, my fears, and he listened like every word I said mattered. And I felt myself falling, felt my Omega bonding to this dangerous alpha who'd saved us. I wish I knew it was preparation for my doom. On day 6, Adrien took me to dinner, a restaurant so expensive I couldn't even pronounce half the items on the menu, and he held my hand across the table, his thumb stroking my palm, and he told me about his wife, about Elena, about how she'd wanted children so badly, about how she died bringing Marcus into the world, about how he blamed himself, blamed Marcus, blamed everyone, and I cried for him, for his loss, and he kissed me in the car on the way home, desperate and hungry. We had sex that night, Adrien's hands worship gentle as he undressed me, his mouth on every inch of my skin, and when he bit down on my neck, marking me, claiming me as his Omega, his mate, I came apart under him, and I thought this was it. This was my happy ending. This was fate rewarding me for all my suffering. I was so fucking wrong, and I should have known better, should have known that happiness like that never lasted, not for Omegas like me. Adrien changed overnight. The gentleness evaporated, replaced by cold cruelty. And when I reached for him the next morning, he shoved me away, his lip curling with disgust. "Don't touch me. I have a meeting," he snapped, and I felt the first crack in my newly healed heart. He started coming home late, stinking of perfume and other omegas, and when I asked him about it, my voice shaking, he laughed in my face. "Did you really think I'd be faithful to you? You're the help, Kai. You're here to feed Marcus and to warm my bed," he said, and each word was a blade between my ribs. I tried everything to win him back, wore the lingerie he'd bought me, cooked elaborate meals, kept myself available and willing, but he barely looked at me, barely acknowledged my existence except to criticize. "You're getting fat. Maybe you should eat less," he commented one morning, and I'd just given birth 3 months ago. My body was still recovering, but his words burrowed under my skin, and I started skipping meals. "River cries too much. Can't you control your own child?" he complained when River had a bad night, and I started keeping River in my room all the time, terrified of disturbing Adrien. "You're so needy, so pathetic. God, why did I ever mark you?" he said one night when I asked if he still wanted me, and I locked myself in the bathroom and scratched at his mark until I bled, trying to remove it, trying to erase him from my skin. The abuse escalated slowly, comments became shoves, shoves became slaps, and the first time Adrien hit me hard enough to leave a bruise, I told myself it was my fault. I'd been too clingy, too emotional, too much. River started getting sick, constant colds that wouldn't heal, and I begged Adrien to take us to the doctor, but he refused, said I was being dramatic, said Omega children were weak anyway, and when I took River to the emergency room myself, Adrien was waiting when I got home. "You defied me," he said, his voice deadly quiet, and he grabbed my throat, slammed me against the wall, and I felt my ribs crack under the pressure. "You went behind my back, and now you'll learn what happens to disobedient omegas." He locked me in the bedroom for 2 days, no food, no water, just me and River crying together. And when he finally let me out, I was too weak to stand, too broken to fight. I stopped trying after that, became a ghost in Adrien's home, existed only to feed Marcus and care for River, and I watched myself disappear piece by piece, watched the light fade from my eyes, and I knew I was dying, not physically but in every way that mattered. River got sick again 2 months later, a fever that spiked to 104, and I begged Adrien on my knees, sobbed and pleaded, and he looked at me with such hatred. "Fine, take him, but don't come crying to me when the doctors say there's nothing wrong and you've wasted thousands of dollars," Adrien said, and I ran, River burning in my arms. The hospital said it was pneumonia, said River needed to be admitted immediately, and I called Adrien, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone, and he didn't answer, so I texted him, told him it was serious, told him I needed him, and he left me on read. River died 3 days later, his tiny hand in mine, his body too small to fight the infection, and I felt my soul leave my body, felt everything that made me human just shatter, and I called Adrien, told him our baby was gone, and he hung up on me without saying a word. I went back to the penthouse in a daze, River's empty car seat in my hand, and I found Adrien in his office with another Omega on his lap, her mouth on his neck, and when he saw me, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "Get out. I'm busy," he said, and the Omega giggled, and I lunged at him, screaming, hitting, and Adrien threw me off, his hand around my throat. "Your bastard is dead. Good riddance. Now I don't have to pretend to care about him anymore." Adrien snarled, and he dragged me to the door, threw me into the hallway in just my pajamas. No shoes, no phone, no wallet, and I heard the lock click, heard him go back to the Omega, and I realized I had nothing left. No reason to keep going, no reason to keep breathing. I walked down 40 flights of stairs, walked out into the freezing December night, and I kept walking, just walking, and I thought about jumping in front of a car, about ending it, about finally being free from this pain. That's when the car pulled up beside me, a sleek silver Mercedes, and the window rolled down, and the alpha inside had kind brown eyes and a worried expression, and he looked at me like I was a person, not a thing, and I broke down completely. "Please," I sobbed, not even knowing what I was asking for, and the alpha got out, wrapped his coat around my shaking shoulders, and he smelled like vanilla and safety, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could survive this after all. The alpha's name was Ezra, and the first thing he did after wrapping his coat around me was call the police, which was how I ended up in an interrogation room at 2 a.m., shaking so hard my teeth rattled, while a female detective with cold eyes asked me if I wanted to press charges against Adrian Cross. "He killed my baby?" I whispered, my voice raw from screaming, and the detective leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad. "Did you see him kill your son? Did he physically harm the child?" she asked, and I shook my head because it wasn't like that. It was worse than that. It was neglect and cruelty and deliberate malice, but how could I prove it? He refused to let me take River to the doctor when he was sick. He locked us in a room without food or water for 2 days. He said Omega children were weak, and if River couldn't survive a cold, he wasn't worth saving. I said, the words tumbling out, and the detective wrote everything down. But her expression told me what I already knew. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to bring down someone like Adrian Cross. Ezra sat beside me through the entire interview, his hand on my shoulder, grounding me. And when the detective finally said they'd investigate but couldn't make any promises, Ezra stood up, his jaw tight with anger. "That's it? You're just going to let him get away with killing a child?" Ezra demanded. And the detective gave him a look that said she'd heard it all before. "Mr. Laurent, Adrian Cross is one of the most powerful men in this city, without physical evidence, without witnesses, without a body that shows clear signs of abuse. We can't touch him. And even if we could, his lawyers would bury us in paperwork for years," she said. And I felt hope die in my chest, felt the last piece of my soul crumble into dust. Ezra took me to his apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Queens that smelled like coffee and old books. And he gave me his bed while he took the couch, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I was still alive, wondering why I hadn't just walked into a moving car when I had the chance. I woke up screaming, my breasts engorged and leaking, my body searching for River, for Marcus, for the babies I'd been feeding for months, and Ezra burst into the room, his eyes wild with panic. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" he asked, and I couldn't answer, couldn't speak past the sobs tearing through me, and Ezra pulled me into his arms, rocked me like a child, and I cried until there was nothing left. "I need a breast pump," I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse, and Ezra looked confused until I gestured to my chest, to the wet spots spreading across the shirt he'd loaned me, and understanding dawned on his face. "Right, okay, I'll go get one. Just stay here, don't leave, please," he said, and he was gone before I could respond, and I sat there alone, wondering what kind of alpha would help a broken Omega he'd just met, wondering what Ezra wanted from me because everyone wanted something. He came back an hour later with 3 different breast pumps, bottles, nursing pads, and enough food to feed an army, and he set it all down on the bed, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I didn't know which one to get, so I got all of them, and the lady at the store said you'd need to eat a lot to keep your supply up, so I got groceries too, Ezra rambled, and I stared at him. This stranger who was showing me more kindness than my own mate ever had, and something in my chest cracked open, something that felt like the beginning of healing. I pumped for the first time in Ezra's bathroom, watching my milk fill the bottles, milk that Marcus would never drink, milk that River would never need, and I poured it down the sink, watched it swirl away, and I felt like I was pouring out pieces of my soul. 3 days passed. Ezra went to work during the day, managing a small bookstore in Manhattan, and I stayed in his apartment, existing in a fog of grief and pain, and every night he came home with dinner and sat with me while I ate, never pushing, never asking for anything, just being there. On day 4, someone knocked on the door, loud and aggressive, and Ezra looked through the peephole, his face going pale. "It's Adrian's men, they're asking about you," he whispered, and panic seized my chest, made my heart race so fast I thought it might explode. "Don't let them in, please, he'll kill me," I begged, scrambling off the couch, looking for somewhere to hide, and Ezra grabbed my shoulders, forced me to look at him. "I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise, but you need to go into the bedroom and lock the door, and if anything happens, there's a fire escape outside the window, you run and you don't look back," Ezra said, his alpha voice coming through strong and protective, and I nodded, running to the bedroom just as Ezra opened the front door. I pressed my ear against the bedroom door, listening to the muffled conversation, hearing Ezra's calm voice and another man's aggressive tone. And then I heard it, Adrian's voice, smooth and deadly. "I know he's here. I can smell him, and you're going to hand him over, or I'm going to burn this building down with everyone in it," Adrien said, and my blood turned to ice. "He's not here, and even if he was, I wouldn't give him to you. You don't deserve him, you never did," Ezra said, and I heard a scuffle, heard Ezra grunt in pain, and I couldn't take it anymore, couldn't let someone else get hurt because of me. I opened the bedroom door, stepped into the living room, and there was Adrien, his fist in Ezra's shirt, blood dripping from Ezra's nose, and 3 of Adrien's men standing behind him, and when Adrien saw me, his face twisted into something ugly and triumphant. "There you are, my wayward mate. Did you really think you could run from me?" Adrien said, dropping Ezra and stalking toward me, and I backed up until I hit the wall, trapped. "I'm not going back with you. I'd rather die," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, and Adrien laughed. That cruel sound that haunted my nightmares. "You don't have a choice, Omega, you're mine, you have my mark, and you're coming home even if I have to drag you," Adrien growled, reaching for me, and that's when Ezra tackled him from behind, bringing Adrien crashing to the floor. "Run!" Ezra shouted, grappling with Adrien, and Adrien's men moved toward them. And I saw my chance, ran for the fire escape, threw open the window, and climbed out into the night. I heard Adrien roaring behind me, heard footsteps pounding, and I ran down the fire escape so fast I almost fell, my bare feet slipping on the metal, and when I hit the ground, I kept running, through alleys and side streets, until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I collapsed behind a dumpster in some nameless alley, gasping for air, and I heard footsteps approaching, slow and measured, and I knew it was over, knew Adrien had found me. But when the figure rounded the corner, it wasn't Adrien. It was a woman, an Omega like me, with silver hair and scars covering her arms, and she looked at me with knowing eyes. "You're running from Adrian Cross," she said. Not a question, and I nodded, too exhausted to lie, and she smiled, cold and sharp. "Good, I've been waiting for someone like you. Someone he broke, someone who wants revenge as much as I do," she said, holding out her hand. "My name is Sage, and I'm going to teach you how to destroy him." I stared at her hand, at the scars that told stories of survival, and I thought about River, about his tiny coffin that I'd never gotten to see, about Adrien's cruel words and crueler hands, and I took her hand, let her pull me to my feet. "What do you mean destroy him?" I asked, and Sage's smile widened, became something predatory and dangerous. "Adrian Cross has a secret, something that could bring his entire empire crashing down, and I know where it is, but I need someone close to him, someone with access to his home, someone he won't suspect," Sage said, and my mind raced, trying to understand. "I can't go back there, he'll kill me," I protested, but Sage shook her head. "You won't have to, not yet. First we need to make you valuable again, we need to give you leverage, and I know exactly how to do it," she said, pulling me deeper into the alley, to a door I hadn't noticed, and when she opened it, I saw stairs leading down into darkness. "Where are we going?" I asked, fear creeping up my spine, and Sage looked back at me, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "To meet someone who can change everything, someone who hates Adrien as much as we do, someone with the power to actually hurt him," Sage said, and I followed her down the stairs because what choice did I have? What else was left for me but revenge? The basement opened into a massive space. Hundreds of Omegas gathered in groups, some crying, some bandaging wounds, some holding children, and at the center of it all stood an alpha I recognized immediately. Lorenzo Moretti, Adrien's biggest rival, the man who'd been fighting for control of the city for years. "You brought me a gift, Sage," Lorenzo said, his voice smooth as silk, and he walked toward us. His eyes locked on my neck, on Adrien's mark, and he smiled. "I brought you Adrian Cross's mate, broken and desperate and ready to do anything for revenge," Sage said, pushing me forward, and I stumbled, caught myself, and looked up at Lorenzo. "Is this true, little Omega? Do you want to hurt the man who hurt you?" Lorenzo asked, crouching down so we were eye level, and I saw genuine curiosity in his face. Not cruelty, not the cold indifference Adrien had shown me. "Yes," I whispered, and then louder, stronger. "Yes, I want to destroy him. I want him to feel everything he made me feel. I want him to lose everything like I did." Lorenzo's smile turned sharp, turned hungry, and he stood up, addressing the entire room. Adrian Cross made a mistake. He threw away something precious, and now we're going to use that against him. We're going to infiltrate his organization, steal his secrets, and when we're done, there won't be anything left of him but ashes. Lorenzo announced, and the room erupted in cheers, in vengeful shouts, and I felt something dark and powerful bloom in my chest. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, and Lorenzo turned back to me, his hand cupping my face gently. "First, we need to remove his mark. It's a beacon. It lets him track you, lets him claim you, and you'll never be free as long as you wear it," Lorenzo said, and my hand flew to my neck, to the raised scar tissue where Adrien had bitten me. "How?" I asked, and Sage stepped forward, pulling out a knife, and my blood ran cold. "The old way, we cut it out," she said, and I felt my knees go weak. But I nodded because if this was what it took, if this was the price of freedom, of revenge, then I'd pay it gladly. They laid me on a table, 3 omegas holding me down, and Sage positioned the knife against my neck, and Lorenzo leaned over me, his eyes serious. "This is going to hurt more than anything you've ever felt. The bond will fight it, your omega will scream, but you have to stay still. If you move, Sage could hit your artery and you'll bleed out," Lorenzo warned, and I closed my eyes, thought of River's face, thought of Adrian's cruelty, and I nodded. "Do it," I said, and Sage pressed the knife into my skin, and pain exploded through my body, white-hot and all-consuming, and I screamed until my voice gave out, screamed until I tasted blood, and through it all, I felt the bond with Adrien tearing, felt it ripping away piece by piece. When it was finally over, when Sage pulled the bloody chunk of flesh away and threw it in a metal bowl, I felt empty, hollow, free, and I looked up at Lorenzo through tear-filled eyes. "It's done, you're no longer bound to him, you're free," Lorenzo said, pressing gauze to my neck, and I laughed, hysterical and broken. Because I wasn't free, I'd never be free, but at least now I had a purpose, I had revenge. I passed out from the pain, and when I woke up, I was in a bed with clean sheets, my neck wrapped in bandages, and Sage was sitting beside me, watching. "Welcome to the resistance," she said quietly, and I looked around, saw dozens of other omegas in beds around me, all with bandaged necks, all with the same hollow look in their eyes. "How many?" I asked, my voice hoarse, and Sage smiled sadly. 200 and counting. All of us victims of Adrian Cross or his associates. All of us ready to burn his world down," she said, and I felt tears slip down my cheeks because I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. "What happens now?" I asked, and Sage stood up, held out her hand again. "Now we train you, teach you how to fight, how to spy, how to survive, and when you're ready, we send you back into Adrian's world. But this time you'll be the weapon that destroys him," Sage said, and I took her hand, let her pull me to standing despite the pain. "How long will that take?" I asked, and Sage's smile turned vicious. 3 months, and then Adrian Cross will wish he'd never let you go," she said, and I looked at my reflection in the window, saw the bandage on my neck, saw the emptiness in my eyes, saw someone I didn't recognize, and I thought, good, let him see what he created, let him see the monster he made. 3 months of training turned me into someone Adrien wouldn't recognize. I could fight, could shoot, could lie without flinching, and when Lorenzo said it was time to go back, I was ready, I was hungry for it. The plan was simple. I'd accidentally run into Adrien at his favorite restaurant, let him see me looking healthy and strong, let him think I'd moved on, and when his pride demanded he get me back, I'd walk right back into his penthouse with a smile on my face and a knife behind my back. I wore a red dress that hugged every curve, my hair longer now and dyed black, my neck healed into a smooth scar that I covered with makeup, and when I walked into Sereno's at exactly 8 p.m., I felt Adrian's eyes on me before I even saw him. He was at his usual table in the back, Marcus asleep in a carrier beside him, and there was a new Omega sitting across from him, young and pretty and terrified, and I felt nothing, no jealousy, no pain, just cold satisfaction. I walked past his table without looking, sat at the bar, ordered an expensive whiskey, and I felt him watching me, felt his confusion, his anger, his need, and I counted to 60 before he appeared beside me. "Kai," Adrien said, his voice rough, and I turned slowly, like I just noticed him, and I let surprise cross my face. Adrien, I didn't know you came here, I said casually, taking a sip of my drink, and I watched his jaw clench, watched his hands curl into fists. You look different, he said, his eyes roaming over my body, and I saw the hunger there, the same hunger that had drawn me in the first place, and I smiled. I am different, I'm better, I'm free, I said, and Adrian's hand shot out, gripped my wrist hard enough to bruise, and the bartender looked over nervously but didn't intervene because everyone knew who Adrian Cross was. You're wearing makeup over my mark? Adrien growled, leaning in close, and I could smell his scent, could feel my traitorous Omega responding despite everything, and I forced myself to laugh. Your mark is gone. I had it removed. You don't own me anymore, I said, and I pulled down the collar of my dress, showed him the smooth skin where his bite used to be, and I watched his face go pale with rage. That's impossible. You can't remove a mating mark. You're lying, Adrien said, but his voice shook, and I knew he could smell the truth on me. It's possible if you're willing to endure enough pain, and trust me, I was willing, anything to erase you from my body, I said, standing up, and Adrian's hand tightened on my wrist, pulled me against his chest. You're still mine, marked or not, you'll always be mine, he whispered against my ear, and I felt him hard against my hip, felt his need, and I knew I had him. Prove it? I challenged, and Adrian's eyes flashed gold, and he threw money on the bar, dragged me out of the restaurant, and I saw the Omega he'd been with watching us leave, her face crumpling with hurt, and I felt a moment of pity before Adrien shoved me into his car. We didn't make it to his penthouse. Adrien took me in the back of his SUV, his hands bruising on my hips, his teeth on my throat trying to remark me, and I let him. I took everything he gave me and I begged for more, because this was part of the plan. This was how I got back inside. I'm sorry, Adrien gasped against my skin, his body shaking, and I almost believed him, almost fell for it again. But then I remembered River's tiny coffin, remembered the other Omega he'd been with, remembered everything. I know, I lied, stroking his hair, and Adrien pulled back, looked at me with something that might have been love if he was capable of it. Come home. Bring your things, move back in. I'll do better this time, I swear, Adrien said, and I pretended to hesitate, pretended to think about it. What about Marcus? What about that Omega you were with? I asked, and Adrian's face hardened. She's nothing, hired help, and Marcus needs you. He's been crying again, won't eat, won't sleep. The doctors say he's failing again, Adrien said, and guilt tried to worm its way into my chest, but I crushed it because Marcus wasn't my responsibility anymore, not after what Adrien had done. Okay, I said softly, I'll come home, but things have to be different. You have to treat me like a partner, not property. Adrien nodded eagerly, desperately, and I knew he'd agree to anything right now, knew his obsession with me had only grown in my absence, and that was exactly what Lorenzo was counting on. I moved back into the penthouse that night, and it was exactly the same marble floors, the same massive windows, the same nursery where Marcus slept, and I felt like I was walking into a tomb. Adrien was gentle at first, brought me flowers, cooked me dinner, asked about my time away, and I fed him lies, told him I'd been staying with a friend in Boston, told him I'd been healing, and he believed me because he wanted to, because his ego demanded that I'd been miserable without him. I started feeding Marcus again. My body had stopped producing milk months ago, but Lorenzo had given me pills, hormones that would trick my system into lactating, and within a week my breasts were full again and Marcus latched like he'd never stopped. I felt nothing when I fed him, no connection, no maternal instinct, just the mechanical act of providing nutrition, and I think Marcus felt it too, because he'd watch me with his big gray eyes that looked exactly like Adrian's, and something in his expression seemed sad, seemed knowing. 2 weeks after I moved back, I planted the first bug, a tiny device smaller than a fingernail that I stuck under Adrian's desk in his office, and I listened that night through the earpiece Sage had given me as Adrien talked to his associates about shipments and payments and murders, and I recorded everything. Lorenzo was pleased when I delivered the recordings, his hand on my shoulder, his praise warm, and I felt pride for the first time in months. Felt like I was actually doing something that mattered. You're doing amazing, Kai. A few more weeks and we'll have everything we need to bury him, Lorenzo said, and I nodded, ignoring the way my Omega preened under his attention, the way my body responded to his alpha presence. Adrien started noticing the changes in me, the way I was distant, the way I didn't flinch when he raised his voice, the way I watched him with calculating eyes, and one night he cornered me in the bedroom, his face suspicious. "You're different, you're cold, what happened to you?" Adrien demanded, and I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You happened to me, you broke me, and when I put myself back together, I left the soft parts behind," I said honestly, and Adrien's hand came up like he was going to hit me, but he stopped himself, his jaw working. "I made you stronger," he said instead, and I laughed, bitter and harsh. "You made me a monster, just like you?" I replied, and something flickered in Adrien's eyes, something that might have been regret, but it was gone too quickly to tell. The night everything fell apart started like any other. I was feeding Marcus in the nursery when I heard shouting from Adrien's office, heard glass breaking, and I put Marcus in his crib and crept down the hallway. Adrien was on the phone, his face purple with rage, and he was screaming about betrayal, about bugs, about leaks, and my blood turned to ice because someone had found out, someone had talked. "I don't care who it is. I want everyone in this house interrogated. Someone is feeding information to Lorenzo Moretti, and I will find them." Adrien roared, and his eyes landed on me in the doorway, and I saw suspicion bloom on his face. "Kai, come here," he said quietly, too quietly, and I walked forward on numb legs, my heart pounding so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. "Strip," Adrien commanded, and I stared at him, confused. I said, "Strip. If you have nothing to hide, you'll do it now." I stripped with shaking hands, let my clothes pool at my feet, and Adrien circled me like a predator, his eyes searching my body for devices, for proof, and when he found nothing because all my equipment was hidden in my room, I saw him relax slightly. "Get dressed," he said, turning away, and I thought I was safe, thought I'd passed his test. But then he spoke again. "I'm moving us tomorrow somewhere secure, somewhere far away from the city, and you're not leaving my sight until I figure out who the rat is." Panic clawed at my throat because if Adrien moved me, I'd lose contact with Lorenzo, I'd lose my chance for revenge, and I couldn't let that happen, I wouldn't. That night, while Adrien slept, I snuck out of bed, grabbed my hidden phone, and texted Lorenzo one word: "Now." Within 30 minutes, the penthouse exploded with sound, federal agents swarming through the door, and Adrien woke up swinging, reached for the gun under his pillow, but I was faster. I grabbed it first, pointed it at his chest. "Don't move," I said, my voice steady, and Adrien looked at me with such betrayal, such hurt, and I felt nothing. "You did this, you're the rat," he said, and I nodded, watching as agents flooded the room, as they cuffed him, read him his rights. "I did this, I destroyed you, just like you destroyed me," I said, and Adrien lunged for me. But the agents held him back, dragged him away screaming my name, promising revenge, promising death. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, smiled at me, proud and approving, and he walked over, pulled me into his arms. "You did it, you got him, Adrian Cross is finished," Lorenzo said, and I should have felt triumphant, should have felt satisfied, but all I felt was empty. The trial was fast, Adrien's lawyers tried everything, but with the evidence I'd gathered, the recordings, the testimonies from the other Omegas in Lorenzo's care, there was no way out, and Adrian Cross was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Marcus was taken by child services, placed with Adrien's sister who I'd never met, and I signed away any custody rights because I couldn't look at that baby without seeing his father, without remembering everything I'd lost. Lorenzo offered me a place in his organization, protection, a future, and I almost said yes, almost let another alpha control my life. But Sage grabbed my arm, pulled me aside. "Don't do it, don't trade one cage for another, you're free now, actually free, so be free," she said, and I looked at her, at this Omega who'd saved me, and I hugged her tight. I left New York that night, took a bus to nowhere, and I ended up in a small town in Montana where nobody knew my name, nobody knew my story, and I got a job at a diner, rented a tiny apartment, and I tried to figure out who Kai Park was when he wasn't defined by trauma. 6 weeks after I left, I realized I was pregnant. My heat had come and gone without me noticing, and somewhere in the chaos of the last few months, either Adrien or Lorenzo had gotten me pregnant, and I didn't know which, didn't want to know. I thought about getting rid of it, thought about it for days, but every time I tried to make the appointment, I'd think of River, of his smile, of his laugh, and I couldn't do it. Couldn't lose another child even if this one was conceived in violence and lies. The pregnancy was brutal, my body producing not one but 4 babies, quadruplets, and the doctor said it was a miracle I was carrying them all, said most omegas couldn't sustain that many, but my body was strong, had been through worse, and it held on. Sage found me when I was 7 months pregnant, showed up at my diner with supplies and money and a fierce hug, and she stayed with me through the rest of the pregnancy, held my hand when the contractions started, coached me through 36 hours of labor. I gave birth to 4 perfect babies, 3 boys and a girl, and when the nurse placed them in my arms, all of them crying, all of them healthy, I felt something break open in my chest, something that had been frozen since River died. "What are you going to name them?" Sage asked, exhausted but smiling, and I looked down at my children, at these tiny humans who'd never asked to be born into this mess, and I made them a promise. River, for my first son, Elena, for Marcus's mother, Ezra, for the alpha who tried to save me, and Hope, because that's what they are, I said, tears streaming down my face, and Sage squeezed my hand. "Perfect," she whispered, and I looked at my 4 babies, felt their weight in my arms, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could do this, could give them the life I never had, could break the cycle of pain and violence that had defined me. Marcus would grow up without me, without his father, in a family that might love him or might resent him for who his father was, and I felt guilt about that, felt like I'd abandoned him, but I also knew I couldn't be what he needed, couldn't look at him without seeing Adrien, and maybe that made me a monster, but I'd accepted that about myself. Adrien was in prison, would die in prison, and sometimes I wondered if he thought about me, if he regretted what he'd done, if he understood that he'd destroyed the only person who'd ever truly tried to save him. Lorenzo sent money every month, child support even though I couldn't prove the babies were his, and I accepted it because pride didn't feed children, didn't keep them clothed and warm, and my babies deserved everything. Sage stayed for 3 months, helped me learn how to nurse 4 infants, how to survive on no sleep, how to love again when I thought I'd forgotten how, and when she finally left, promising to visit, I stood in my tiny apartment surrounded by crying babies and dirty laundry and half-empty formula bottles, and I smiled. This was my life now, chaotic and exhausting and beautiful, and I was happy, actually happy, and that felt like the greatest revenge of all, that Adrien had tried to break me, had tried to destroy me, and I'd survived, I'd thrived, I'd created life from death. River, Elena, Ezra, and Hope grew fast, their little personalities emerging, and I saw pieces of myself in them, pieces of Adrien, pieces of maybe Lorenzo, and I loved them all equally, fiercely, with everything I had left. Some nights I still woke up screaming, still felt phantom hands around my throat, still heard Adrien's voice telling me I was worthless, but then one of my babies would cry, would need me, and I'd get up, I'd feed them, I'd hold them, and the nightmares would fade. I never dated again, never let another alpha close, because I'd learned my lesson, learned that I was enough on my own, that I didn't need someone else to complete me, and my children had me, had Sage who visited monthly, had each other, and that was more than I'd ever had growing up. On their first birthday, I baked a cake, lit 4 candles, and I told them about River, about their brother who died too young, and I promised them I'd never let anything happen to them. I'd fight for them, I'd kill for them, I'd die for them if I had to. They looked at me with wide eyes, too young to understand, but someday they would, someday I'd tell them the whole story, the darkness I came from, the violence that made them, and I'd teach them to be better, to be kinder, to break the cycle. Adrien sent 1 letter from prison, smuggled out by a guard he'd bribed, and it said 3 words, "I'm sorry, Kai," and I burned it, watched the paper curl and blacken, and I felt nothing, because sorry didn't bring River back. Sorry didn't heal the scars. Sorry was just a word. I heard through Sage that Adrien had been killed in prison, stabbed 17 times by an Omega whose mate he'd murdered years ago, and I should have felt something, should have felt closure or satisfaction, but all I felt was tired, tired of death, tired of revenge, tired of the endless cycle of violence. Marcus turned 2 the same month my quadruplets did, and I wondered if he was happy, if his aunt loved him, if he remembered me at all, and I sent an anonymous gift through Sage, a photo album filled with pictures of him as a baby, of me feeding him, of the brief time when his father had been kind, because every child deserved to know they'd been loved once, even if it hadn't lasted. My babies learned to walk, learned to talk, and their first words were mama. And I cried happy tears for the first time in years, because I was someone's mama. I was their entire world, and that was enough. That was everything. Life moved forward, simple and quiet, and I worked my shifts at the diner, came home to chaos, read bedtime stories, sang lullabies, and I built a life from the ashes of the old one. And it wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was mine and no one could take it from me. River, Elena, Ezra, and Hope were my redemption, my second chance, my proof that something beautiful could come from something broken. And every day I woke up grateful to be alive, grateful to be their mother, grateful that I'd survived long enough to find this peace. The scars on my neck faded but never disappeared, a reminder of what I'd endured, what I'd overcome, and sometimes my children would trace them with tiny fingers and ask what happened, and I'd tell them the truth, that sometimes people hurt you, but you survive anyway, you keep going, you build something better. And that's what I did, I survived, I kept going, I built something better, and in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, living well, loving fiercely, and refusing to let the darkness win. The end.